Hi, welcome to this welcome webinar for PLOS Complex Systems. We're really excited to have you all join us today, and thank you so much for carving out some time in your day to come along and hear this information. As I mentioned before, this presentation is being recorded, so if you weren't able to attend for all the presentation, or if you know someone who wasn't able to attend today, it is going to be available online and shared afterwards. This is the rough schedule that we're going to have today, so me and Joe will both introduce ourselves and talk a bit about PLOS Complex Systems, what the journal is intended for, how it's been set up. The bulk of today's presentation is going to be talking about the academic editor role, so giving you a nice run through of what this role is, how it's going to operate, how you're going to work day to day as an academic editor on our board, which might differ a little bit from how you've been an academic editor on other boards in the past. And we'll be linking out to other resources and information and where you can find that. As I mentioned, there'll be a Q&A section at the end, so if anything comes up in the progress of the presentation that you have questions about or you don't think has been explained fully, please do keep that in mind, and we're here for any questions that you have. And then if we have some time at the end, and if people are able to hang around and chat to one another and get to know other board members, as you're all going to be working together on this newly launched journal, so it'd be great to be able to put some faces to names and get to know other people who are all working together here. So a brief intro for myself and Joe. You probably already know Joe. My name's Jenny. I work with the R&R team, and we are mainly focused on editorial board management and the editorial board experience. You probably have spoken to either myself or one of my colleagues on the R&R team when you were joining PLOS Complex Systems, as we were going through onboarding information and vetting. We do a lot of recruitment across all of PLOS journals. We look for board management stats as well, so to see if there's any areas where our editorial boards could use extra support, if there are areas where our submissions are outpacing our current board staff, if there's areas that our board staff feel that the experience could be improved. You might be getting some communications from us during your time with PLOS about board improvement and your board experience. So all of those sit within the R&R team. So you probably interact with either myself or one of my team in your time here at PLOS Complex Systems. And also our one of the email inboxes linked later is one that we have an eye on as well. So we might be answering questions for you in the future around the role of an academic editor or specific queries around the editorial, the academic editor experience. And with that, I'll pass to you, Joe.
Hi, guys. Again, as Jenny says, thanks you all for coming. Appreciate you making the time today. Do you mind moving forward a couple of slides, please, Jenny? So, as I said, we're introducing PLOS Complex Systems. Next one, please.
We have a quick poll. Actually, we're going to just see who's calling in from where, if you want to, before you give an intro for the journal itself, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Sorry, we just wanted to have a little idea about where everyone's from here, your experience in editorial boards, just if you've been part of an editorial board before, if you're first. And so we'd love to have an idea about what kind of experience are you coming to this role with, and also how many years have you been a researcher, and where are you researching from at the moment? Because one of our main aims is to try and improve our diversity, both geographical and research based. So we want to try and make sure that we're casting as broad a net as possible. So we'd love to know where everyone's based, where you're researching, and where you've researched before. I'll just give it a few more seconds so we can have a quick idea. Yeah, wow, we got a really good spread here. Yeah, some people kind of beginning of a research career, some people who've been here for quite a while. Quite a few people, this is your first editorial board that you've joined. That's really lovely to hear. Thank you so much for picking us as either your first or your first few editorial boards that you've joined. We hope you have a really good experience with us. We hold up well to other boards you've been on. And yeah, really good spread as well for where people are based from. Like I mentioned, we wanted to try and have as broad a spread as possible so that we make sure that we're covering all our bases with this newly launched journal. I want to get everyone's perspective going in. So sorry to interrupt you, Joe. This is a really good little cross section of views here today.
That's good. If anyone has any colleagues in Antarctica, please send them our way. We never get anyone calling in from there.
The one continent we're never able to cover. Damn. So I don't pass back to you.
And so I thought I'd just sort of dive into the next couple of slides, kind of overall vision and sort of mission, what we're kind of hoping to achieve, context from the PLOS side about why we think this is a good time to launch this journal and some of the other factors going on, and then a little sort of like quick overview of the format of the journal so you guys can understand it in its entirety. So next slide, please, Jenny. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Cool. And so yeah, so the vision and the mission of the journal, sort of the stock phrase at the top is accurate. It's we're a selective community-led journal focused on understanding the drivers and behaviors of all types of complex systems. And when we mean all types, we truly mean all types. So whether that's people working in networks, people working in applied physics, applied mathematics, or whether that's people who are working in, say, epidemiology, who consider themselves more traditional researchers in the epidemiology sense, but are interested in using complex analysis or complex tools in their own work. So as the field grows, making sure that we're covering all of those topics for us. And so as me and my colleagues in building this journal spent a lot of time speaking to folks like yourselves out in the community and around the world. And one of the things that we kind of realized, or one of the opportunities we saw with the journal and that we really think we can deliver on, is sort of developing the connectivity of the complex systems community. So, there's a lot of folks working on really interesting things, but they tend to seem to be more individual problems and things like, cancer, where there's a million researchers across the world all sort of pushing in one direction to cure cancer. And so the way that we really sort of hope to do that is, one, straightforward enough, just publishing really excellent research that someone, in biology could read someone's physics work and say, oh, I think that's, at least interesting or applicable to me. And then, really engaging with you guys at the board and the wider fields in just sort of trying to create more of a global community. And that means knowledge sharing, making sure that, if you guys are hosting events that you think other members of the boards should be aware of, or you have students going places or events for students, that just making sure that we're all collaborating to share that information so we can really grow this kind of like rich global community and sort of, foster collaboration ideally. And my dream state is seeing people on the editorial board writing papers with people that they've met through working on the editorial board. I think that would be a really wonderful thing to see. And finally, because we're PLOS, we are very interested in the open science aspect of things. We want to improve open science practices for the journal, and we want to make sure that that is done accessibly. There's lots of different data sets and types of data sets that people in complex systems are using. And so when we say we want there to be a code sharing policy or data sharing policy, how can we implement one that is both progressive and that it moves the needle in increasing those sharing rates, but also isn't punitive to people who, perhaps might not have the same institutional support for these sorts of things or kind of readiness to do that. And so that's a big part of the editorial board, is getting feedback on how we can create policies that are sort of like equitable, but still progressive. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, a little bit of the context as to why now for this journal. And then, it seems to us that there isn't really any other true comprehensive collection of complexity research. There's some others that have tried. Chaos, which is an interdisciplinary journal, is in the title. It's very much focused towards physics than being, an interdisciplinary journal. It says in the title. And so we think there really is a rich opportunity for us to sort of get these kind of disparate threads and bring them together in under one banner. And we have a really excellent editorial board, you guys included, who I think will be a big part of that. And there's also, an increasing push for interdisciplinary research, both by funders, the incentive structures, and from researchers just understanding that their own work will improve, will be better if they, get more perspectives, involve more perspectives in it. And so, as many of those people are reaching for that perspective is often the complexity perspective. So making sure that as people reach for those tools and skill sets, that they're getting people who are, conscientious users of this data and stuff. And, again, to the open science piece of that is because these are such complex data sets often, and these are complex problems using, large language models, neural networks, AI, those sorts of things, that we want to make sure that we're doing this responsibly. We're using good, trustworthy models and good, trustworthy data sets, and that, by pushing data sharing in as a priority of the journal, that we can sort of build a better future for science on those principles. And finally, purely kind of selfishly, we've seen really good growth in publication in titles that are sort of adjacent to this. So I also manage PLOS computational biology. So we've seen the systems biology section there is very, very popular. And one itself, PLOS One itself has seen really big growth in complexity research in the last few years. And so, sort of related to point one, we think that the PLOS brand and its strength, particularly in the life and medical sciences, is really sort of a leg up for this journal in terms of positioning itself uniquely as a way to be a truly comprehensive home. for all sort of complexity research. And so next slide, please. And so finally, just a little bit of, just so you guys are aware of this, this piece is all available on the website with some more specific examples of the topics covered within. But so the journal is broken up into 7 topical sections that you'll see here. And I just want to call out that, this is very transdisciplinary work. So for some folks, the idea of sections and speaking to them has been a little strange. It's like, we're going to produce transdisciplinary work. But these have been developed with the section editors and with the editor-in-chief, sort of the topics we cover in them. Because, particularly with researchers who are moving into the space for the first time, who might consider themselves more conventional psychology or behavioral researchers using complex tools, we want to have sections that are sort of identifiable to them as well as they move into this space. And so the hope is that, we'll both capture the sort of tried and true, dive through and through networks people and complexity people, and we'll get the sort of new, more curious people coming into our sphere in the next couple of years as well. So yeah, as Jenny says, thank you guys for making some time today. I'm always available for questions, and yeah, hopefully you find this helpful. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so I'm going to run us through just basically what the editorial board on PLOS complex systems is going to look like and how to find that information, what the academic editor role is going to be, and then how you will be invited to handle papers, how you'll process those papers, and then where to find all this information as you go about your kind of daily work. And as I mentioned, everything here is going to be shared afterwards, so don't worry about trying to keep all these, make too many notes or keep things written down. So the PLOS editorial board for complex systems is going to be split into 3 main roles. So we'll have section editors who are top level subject matter experts. These individuals will have the papers which are submitted to complex systems sent to them first for analysis and first checks. They will then analyse what kind of area they think that paper falls into, and if there's anyone on the editorial board that they feel will be appropriate to handle the paper, an academic editor, such as yourselves. The academic editor's role is the kind of main role on the board. You're going to be in charge of the paper from submission to final decision. So everything from first analysing the paper to decide if it's suitable for publication or peer review at all, putting it out for peer review and finding external peer reviewers, assessing those comments from the peer reviewers, making a final decision, and recommending the final step for the publication. We do have a role on the board of a guest editor. These aren't full board member roles, but these are kind of supportive roles in areas where our current section editor and academic editor numbers aren't as strong as the publication numbers we think we'll see. They can help out on a kind of one-time basis on papers that are struggling if we don't have a specific cover, and on our existing editorial board with the option of being promoted to a full-time academic editor in the future. So it's a kind of midway step so that we can still make sure papers are being moved through the process. All of this information about our editorial boards can be found on the Complex Systems website. So here is a full list of all of our board members. This list is updated automatically and very regularly, so any information we have about our editorial board members will be updated here. I know there's a question submitted before this webinar about some information on this editorial board list being inaccurate. If you update your information in EM, which I'll walk through in a moment, everything will then be updated automatically onto this external editorial board list. So that's how you'll be able to change your research institute, if your name changes, if your publication links change. It's all about keeping your information up to date within our internal systems, which I will walk us through. But you can go through here to try and find other editorial board members. You can search by their sections, their disciplines. It's all broken down here about their classifications and the sections that they fall within. So if you're handling a paper or you're looking to handle a paper in a certain area, you can see who else is on the board with that expertise, or find people who have the same expertise as you and researching in the same area. We really love to build a good sense of community between different board members here. So the academic editor role as a whole, as I mentioned, it is from the beginning of the process, at the beginning of the submission of the paper, all the way through to the final decision. So it is your job to conduct the initial assessment based against PLOS's publication criteria, which I'll also run us through briefly, which might be slightly different to publication criteria you've seen for other journals. So we do recommend that you have a quick read through of this to make sure that your understanding of this and the official publication criteria match up. It's then your responsibility to find and secure external reviewers. This can be people in your network, people who you're already aware of. It can be people that you look to find, if it's researchers in areas that you aren't, you don't have any personal connections that you think you could reach out to, or it could be recommendations from the authors who've submitted the paper. You would evaluate their feedback. We would look for several external reviewers, and sometimes these external reviews can be contradictory. There might be that one reviewer is more experienced in the area than the other, has provided a more thorough review than the other. So it was really your responsibility to evaluate the feedback given, decide what weighting you're going to give to it, and have the final editorial decision based on that feedback and your own review of the paper. And then communicate these decisions to the section editor who reached out to you about the paper. You'll have a final review just to make sure there's nothing that they really disagree with in the final decision of the paper. But then after that, your recommendation will be the next action that's taken. You really play a huge role in this community. The majority of the paper process will sit with you. So we really hope that you'll be really active and engaged members of the PLOS editorial board, because you are going to be the backbone of it. This is the code of conduct for editorial board members. It's not going to be anything that we think is going to sit too far outside any code of conduct that you've seen previously, or any conduct that you've already been exhibiting. But it is just a top view line, because we take research, ethics and integrity and our editorial board kind of staff behaviour really seriously. You are ambassadors for PLOS, and we really hope that you enjoy your time with us, but also people who submit to us enjoy the editorial process. So it's very top line. It's just very basic, to be aware of publication ethics, to be aware of confidentiality. This is all available in our onboarding materials that have been sent, also on our external facing website. So do have a read through here. But as I mentioned, there's nothing here that should really confuse or go against anything you've been doing previously. This is where it will be found externally as well. So it is on our main website with a full breakdown of our code of conduct here. So our main system for managing submissions is Editorial Manager, and this is where you'll have your profile, which has all of your research information, your current institute information, best ways to contact you, and this will be where you manage publications from submission to final decision. The main thing that we'd recommend when you log in for the first time is to make sure that all of your contact information is up to date, and to keep this up to date going forward. As I mentioned before, if you change research institute, if you change best email to contact you, please do update it within EM, because this is the information we'll have on record for you if a section editor needs to reach out, or a staff member needs to reach out. We also ask that you keep your areas of expertise up to date, because again, this will be how we know which papers might be appropriate for you to be invited to. And there's also a feature for unavailability dates. We understand that this is a voluntary role, and you're going to have a lot of work that you're doing outside of this. If there is something happening which you would like not to be contacted for a period of time, sabbatical, a very involved research project, we don't want to be a bother. So if you have got something coming up where you are not going to be available to be able to handle any submissions, please do put unavailability dates in there, and we will make sure that nothing is invited or sent your way in that time. Now, this academic editor guide is linked to the presentation and is available on our external website, but it gives a really good breakdown of all the steps I'm going to go through today. As you can see here, it's a very involved guide. It covers everything you're going to need. But it gives a wonderful breakdown here about how to log into EM for the first time, how to update your information, where to find that. The main things I want to point out today are that there's several different areas which are around your research expertise. You have personal classifications, which use our internal taxonomy. So as you go through to select personal classifications here, a screen like this will pop out, and you can go through and select any and all of these taxonomies which apply to you, and add them to your profile. But there is also a section here for keywords, and this is free text. So if there's something which isn't covered by our internal taxonomy, if there's something which you think is either more specific or we haven't been able to cover, please do add it to this keyword section, because both of those will be looked at when section editors are looking to send you invites to handle a paper. And under here is where you can add, you can link your ORCID as well, and then unavailability dates. So again, there'll be a section in your profile here, click through to add your unavailability dates, the reasons to why you're not going to be able to be contacted. And it just means that, as I mentioned, we're not bothering you when you're not going to be available to be able to do any editorial work. So within your main profile on Editorial Manager, there's going to be a breakdown of all the different submissions that you're handling or have handled. This top section here will be submissions broken down by how many reviews have been completed on the paper. So if you know yourself what kind of stage your paper is at, you can go through here to look and research and action those papers. The main section here for the to-do list is a really good breakdown of all of your pending invitations, so invites that are waiting for your action. things that have a discussion attached to them, or ones that have reviews in progress. You've either sent them out for external review, or maybe an external review has already been completed. So this will keep track of any papers that are sat with you. I want to draw your attention to the active discussion section here, just as this is somewhere that internal staff will be contacting you. So it's a good idea if you see anything popping up here, just to check through and see what's been added. It might be that staff are trying to provide you with some extra information, or have an update on a paper that you're handling. So it's a good idea to keep an eye if any discussions pop up on papers that you're handling. Submissions with decisions, these will be papers that you've already seen to a final decision, so you can go back and look at what the final outcome for those papers was, and if any resubmissions come through as well, the previous papers will be sat there. So to break down all the papers that you've previously handled, currently are handling, or are waiting for you to decide if you are able to handle. This is what a paper is going to look like within EM when you're asked to handle it. This, the left here, is our action link kind of menu. I'm just going to run through all these are, so you understand what information is going to be shared on the paper and what you do and don't need to worry about. So obviously the view submission, this is going to be the PDF submitted by the authors. So it's going to have all of the information attached to the paper at submission, the form filled out by the authors. It will have the cover letter, etc. So it's a full list of everything that they've submitted along with the paper. The details page is a top level overview. So it's not only the abstract, but the keywords, the authors, everything attached to the paper, the review status. Anyone who has actioned the paper as well, or done something with the paper, they will likely fill in a note in the details page. So you'll be able to see the process of the paper as it works its way through our system. So it's a good way if you want to just check on the progress of the paper or understand kind of what stage it's at. The details page will probably have the information you need. Initiate discussion or discussions. So this will, depending on if a discussion has already been opened, one of the two of these will be with the title here. Initiate discussion if there hasn't been one started already, discussions if there is already an active discussion. As I mentioned, internal staff will be using this to contact you, so it's a good idea to keep an eye on this if there are any active discussions on a paper. The history of the paper will be a really detailed correspondence and breakdown of the paper. So every email that's been sent attached to anyone attached to the paper, any letters that have been sent, any actions that have happened within Editorial Manager, these will all be broken down with their dates and the person who completed those actions. So if you want to have a better idea about the process of the paper before it got to you, or if you want to understand what's happening to it as it progresses through our system, the history is going to have a really good breakdown of who's touched it when, who's done what, and a good way to track kind of how it got to where it did. The file inventory is any supplemental files, so any extra stuff that's been submitted by the authors, any extra declarations. The classifications are something you're not going to need to worry about. These are classifications attached to the paper. They are something which is specific to the paper being submitted, so you don't need to worry about changing those or updating them. It's just going to be our way of tracking what subject area that paper falls in. The reviews and comments, so this will fall with the invite reviewers section. So if there have already been reviews provided for the paper, there'll be a section here called reviews and comments, and you can click through and see who provided the review, when, what their recommendation was. It's a breakdown of the full form that the reviewer will fill out as well. She'll be able to see all of their feedback regarding the data that's been, the data analysis, the stats check, everything that the reviewer has done. Invite reviewers is where you'll go through when you need to invite reviewers or to manage inviting more reviewers. And then submitting a decision. This is where at the end, when you need to make an editorial decision after you've looked through those external reviews and made your final recommendation for the paper, this will be when you submit the final decision. And sending email is a way to communicate with the authors in the journal regarding that final decision, or getting in contact with the authors if you have any questions. So these are the main action links that you will need to pay attention to or be concerned about. You may also see manuscript flags. So these will sit next to the action links, and there will be different symbols of different colors. This is all for internal tracking within our system. You don't need to worry about these. You won't be adding or removing any flags, and you don't need to pay any special attention unless told specifically about a certain flag. So if you see any flags on a paper, don't worry about it. We don't want you to be concerned about that. It is for internal tracking, but you'll just be able to see it. But as you can see here, there'll be a really good breakdown of the kind of paper you're being asked to handle, when it was submitted, what stage of review is at, who's handling it. So all of this information is able to be seen within Editorial Manager to be able to give it a good overview of what stage the paper's at. So this is kind of top-line overview of the editorial process before the paper gets to you and then when you're handling it. So as you can see here, the section editors are involved both before and after your main actions in the paper. when a paper is first submitted, it will be assigned to a section editor, and they will do an initial assessment on the paper. And at this point, they may decide the paper needs to be sent back for further review or further amendments by the authors, or they may find that it's not suitable to progress to peer review. So some decisions will be made at this point before the paper kind of gets to you. If the section editor does think that this paper can progress to be assessed and handled by an academic editor and is suitable to go to peer review, they will then reach out to you as an academic editor to ask you to handle the paper yourself. You will then also conduct an initial assessment. So again, here you could read through this paper, you could analyse what's been submitted alongside it, and you could at this point decide that it needs to go back for further review immediately, or that it absolutely isn't suitable to be sent to peer review. You can make a discrete decision at this point. We do encourage you, if you are invited to handle a paper which is in your research area, but you are concerned or don't think it would be suitable to be published, you can still make a decision at this point when you accept to handle it and send it back immediately. If you do think it can progress to peer review, however, it's your responsibility then to find the external reviewers, to ask them to handle the paper, and to review the comments that they send back. And as I mentioned before, sometimes these can be weighted in different ways, so it is really going to be down to your expertise and your view as to what needs to be addressed and what needs to be weighted in regarding between the different reviews. You'll have a final decision, and that decision will then be sent to the section editor just for a final review in case there's anything that they themselves are really concerned about for the paper. And then that, if not, that paper will be sent on for the authors with the recommended decision that you've given them. The key things to remember when you're handling these manuscripts, these invites are going to come through email. So it's really important that you keep the correct and up-to-date email address within EM, because it is how section editors will contact you to ask you to handle the papers. As they're going to be sent by section editors, they are the members of the editorial board. And you always have the choice to accept or decline. So as I mentioned before, you can accept to handle the paper and then make an immediate decision. But also, if this isn't in a research area which is appropriate for you, if you don't feel confident being able to make an editorial decision, or you don't have capacity to be able to work on it at that time, you do obviously have the right to be able to reject at this point and just say you're not available, you're not able to handle the paper. It is really up to you, and we want you to have that autonomy to make a decision because you're going to know your schedule and your capabilities best. As we mentioned, the academic editor guide has a really good breakdown here of going through the process of going out for peer review. So, go to handle manuscripts. So, a walkthrough of how you would accept or decline to handle the paper in the email that's sent to you. This is a top-line overview of the rough timeline that we'd like for handling a manuscript. Again, we do understand that this is a voluntary position and you're going to be very busy in other ways. So we understand if you're unable to keep to this time frame. This is just a general guide to keep in mind and kind of the rough percentages of what we think each stage will take. So taking several days to initially evaluate the manuscript, a few weeks to then find external reviewers and have them accept to handle the paper, a few weeks for those reviews to then be submitted and for you to review those, and then a few days at the end to make a final decision and recommendation on handling the paper. Do consider accepting an invite if you have the time to handle it and if it is in your area, and if you have no competing interests. Even if it isn't suitable for peer review, as I mentioned, you can make that decision. If you are concerned at that point that it's not suitable to go to peer review, you can just reject or send back for further revisions at that point, if it is in an area that you feel confident making that decision in. If you are too busy or you have other commitments, it's outside of your area, or you think you have a competing interest, please do have the autonomy to reject that decision, because we don't want to be sending papers your way that aren't in the right area. So the first few days when you're assessing a manuscript, we want you to keep in mind, is it going to be a good fit for the journal? Is it going to fit the scope and meet publication criteria for PLOS? As I mentioned, this publication criteria might be a bit different to other journals you've worked in the past, so we do recommend that you still refer back to that when you're making this decision if you think that it might not fit publication criteria. And is it in your own subject of expertise? Is it something that you feel confident making that editorial decision about? You can decide if it needs to be sent out for peer review, so you can reject, as I mentioned, or you can say, no, this is a suitable paper and it does deserve being sent to peer review too, even if it has some issues or some faults. External peer review is needed on this paper. There are template letters on how to do this, and again, there is a breakdown here step by step about how to find suitable reviewers and where to send out peer review. Suitable reviewers, we want people who have expertise in the subject matter. They're actively publishing, they maybe have expertise in the methodology of the paper, and we want to make sure that they're unbiased and that they have no conflicts of interest that we're concerned about. Again, these might be slightly different to qualifications or recommendations for other journals, so we do recommend you keep an eye on these. Our general guideline here is that they have published more than 5 papers on the topic, preferably a few with corresponding or last author status. They're senior enough to be able to handle the paper, and they're affiliated with a good research institute, just as a good indication that they're going to be able to understand and handle the paper and understand the academic peer review process. Some things that are required for our competing interest checks. We don't want them to be working in the same institute as the authors of the paper, and ideally not in the same institute as other reviewers. We want to try and make sure that this is a balanced and unbiased review. They haven't been listed as an opposing reviewer, so when authors submit their paper, they can ask to have certain reviews blinded from the paper or to not be invited if they feel they're not going to give a fair peer review. And in that case, it's not suitable to invite them yourselves. And they haven't collaborated or published with the author in the last 5 years. In our view of this, we want to make sure that someone looking externally wouldn't be concerned if they knew the credentials of the peer reviewer, which a lot of our peer review now is open. So we would want to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. So 5 years has been decided as the right time frame to make sure. It's been a while since they co-published. There are tips and tricks here from other editors who have had experience advising peer review in the past. We do know that this is a common issue on editorial boards, finding external reviewers. So there's lots of suitable, as I mentioned, tips and tricks here from previous board members. This is going to be the screen within EM when you look to invite a reviewer. So that action link I mentioned before of inviting a reviewer, this will be the home screen that you go to. And there are several different ways that you could invite a peer review. So the first one here is if you found somebody externally. So if there's someone in your research area already, people that you're aware of through your research or through research colleagues, but they're not within our system, then you can add them to our system here in the My Publications section. And the guide here gives a really good breakdown as to how to fill in their contact information and add them to our system so that they can be contacted. They might be suggested by the author. So the author may think there are certain people who would be perfect to review the paper. We would ask that you still check their credentials in this case and make sure that you agree that they could give a good peer review and that they don't violate any of the competing interest issues that I mentioned previously. And again, there's a breakdown here as to how you would fit in someone who has been suggested by the author. These sections here you don't need to worry about. They're not going to be action links that you need to take. The main one to pay attention to here is the Web of Science locator. So this is linked to the Web of Science website, and it will suggest 30 potential reviewers from the Web of Science database. This is going to be a suggestion only, so it's going to be linked by algorithm, by matching of keywords from the publication to the reviewers that are present on the Web of Science locator. So again, it does still need you to go through and check the credentials. It might be that the algorithm has misunderstood the paper that's been submitted or misunderstood the credentials of the reviewers within the database. So you need to go through and decide if you agree that these people would be suitable to invite to review. But they do give a good, generally a pretty good list and a pretty good indication of suitable reviewers. So we do recommend that you make use of it and you have a look and see if anyone suggested there is someone that you'd find suitable. And again, there's a breakdown here as to what that list will look like and how, what things to be concerned about. Sometimes in the review, it might be someone who has already been registered or already been contacted. So it might be flagged there internally, so you'll be able to see that. And again, there's a breakdown here about how you would register a new reviewer, the action links about adding them to our system, adding the correct contact information, making sure that we have up-to-date research information for them so that they can then be contacted. When you're inviting reviewers, there's 2 ways that you can queue that invite. So you'll have a box here which indicates invitation, but also a box here which indicates alternate. We would recommend that you set the queue, the invite queue up so that some of these reviewers are invited immediately. Those with the box ticked here for invitation will be invited immediately as soon as you submit the queue. Anyone that you've ticked with the alternate box will be held back. And then once we get a response from anyone in the initial invite queue, whether that is them declining the invite, it is timed out, so it's taken too long and they haven't given us a response, or they have given us a positive response, the next person in the alternate queue will then be invited until we have enough people attached to the paper to be able to provide those external reviews. We recommend this as a way to help extend the invites queue and to make sure we don't come up with a situation where there's 4 or 5 people who all agree to review the paper at once and there's a lot of information for you to then try and condense in your decision. But it also means that some people, if they're not needed, they're still within our system and can be invited to handle other papers in the future, and we're not waiting to see if they've responded to a previous invite. The invite itself can be customized. So down here, there is a customization box. So if you're inviting someone from your own personal network, someone you've worked with in the past, if you want to customize that invite to be personal to them, to give them a bit more information about the paper you're inviting them to handle, you can go through here. You could also change the days to review. 10 is the number of days that we would recommend and that our normal invites are sent with. And it's the kind of time frame that we'd like to give people to complete their review. So we want to keep in mind, we don't want to give them too short a time frame to respond to an invite. But all this is editable if you have a reason to do so. And again, the editor guide has a good breakdown here as to how to monitor those invitations, how to alter those invitations, and how to check on their progress. And if you need to invite further reviewers. I do want to mention at this time that our internal reviewer database isn't curated in any way. Obviously, when you invite people and add them to our system, you're just giving the information that you found externally. So if you're finding people via this system, the information in there is not curated, is not checked on. So we would recommend you still do external research on any person that you're inviting to this queue, because we want to make sure that we have people who are appropriate, people who aren't of concern or are going to give those good external reviews, but just using our internal system will not be able to guarantee that. So just to remember not to rely on that solely. Then when you make your decision, this is the kind of final stage of the review process. You'll receive the reviews in a structured form. So as I mentioned previously, in that action link, which says review, comments and reviews, it will provide a breakdown of the reviewers' comments, but also they will mention if they think there was data concerns, stats concerns. So it's a really good structured form as to where they might have issues about the paper. It's your responsibility to fully vet these reviews and these concerns and see if there's things that you would give weight to, things that you don't think need to be addressed. There may be some discrepancies between the 2 reviewers, depending on what their expertise is. One may have addressed something which another reviewer doesn't. So really it is down to you to make that final decision. There are 5 available decisions. There is guidance on when to choose these as well, again, in this feedback here. So you could decide that it needs major revision if there's serious concerns with the paper, things that you think the authors really need to revise. Minor revision, it's suitable for publication, but it needs a few kind of tweaks and checks made to it, which are serious enough that they need to be done before it can be published. If you think the manuscript can be published as is, then you can accept it. If you think it isn't going to be suitable for publication, but you think it might be suitable for another journal, you can reject and transfer. And there is a breakdown here as to that process. And you can just decide to reject the paper if you think even after external review, the concerns are too serious at this point. You can recommend that this paper is just rejected. So the breakdown here about what paper will fall into kind of which section, and then how to fill out your decision letter. As I mentioned before, it might be that there are some comments made by reviewers which are more serious than others. So it's up to you whether you want to address them. If you do want to address them, or if you think that they don't need to be paid attention to, it's worth mentioning your decision letter why. Just so the authors understand your thought process. We want to make sure that the authors get a really clear context as to the reviewer's decisions, what your editorial decision is and why you've made that choice, just for their peace of mind. So as I mentioned, all these resources are available online. They're available on our websites. The editor guide here will be sent out after the presentation, but it's also available on our website, so you'll be able to access it at any time. And it gives really good breakdowns and more information as to how to navigate EM, which decisions to make when, etc. So there is also the guidelines for editors webpage here, which is a bit more of an in-depth breakdown as to the academic editor and the section editor role, and it links to all the resources that I've mentioned here. So please feel free to browse that as you want. With that being said, that's the end of the main presentation here. Just want to mention that if you have any questions outside this presentation, anything in the kind of process of your role as an academic editor that you want answered, there is a complex systems main email box, which is very closely monitored, so you can send any queries or questions in there. If you have any questions about the editorial role, the Editorial Services Board has a editorial board email box as well, which is also closely monitored, so you can contact either of these main menus. But also I think Joe has mentioned he's happy to field any questions or any specific concerns especially as this journal is just quite new and being set up. So if you come across anything that you're unsure about, you're not able to find answered in any of the resources we've linked here, please do get in contact. We're really happy to answer any and all questions that you have. We don't want you concerned or confused at any stage of the process, or not confident in being able to make any kind of decision. So if there's anything you come across that you just want a final say or recommendation, please do let us know and get in contact. We're here to help you. So, with that said, we're going to get to the Q&A section. So if anybody has any questions from the presentation. I don't think there's anything in the chat so far.
Well, we just got one. I just got one from JD in the chat. It says, if reviewers' decisions conflict significantly, for example, reject versus accept, any guidelines on how to resolve this as editor? This is a great question. And so the best advice I can give you there is sort of, that's where we really encourage you to work with the section editor. So example, if you're one person, if you're the academic editor, you handle the first review and you're the accept person, and the person you send out to says reject, like very much encourage you to reach out through the discussion tool, through emails to the section editor that will have, it'll be attached to Manuscript, it'll tell you who. And they're sort of senior leaders who work at kind of like across the topical section level. And they're happy to sort of like engage in discussion with you around sort of like what they think their opinion is weighing on manuscripts and that kind of situation as well. If after that there's still some confusion as to why or how we want to handle a manuscript decision, we can always talk to Jose, the editor-in-chief, as well, and try and get some feedback from him. But typically, yeah, work with the section editors who are topical experts, and they can give you either a second or third opinion, whatever you need there.
I have a couple of questions. Just so I'm guest editing for a journal at the moment, and a paper was submitted and it had a number of recommended reviewers who are the reviewers I would have asked anyway. So my question really is there a rule on how many review suggested author suggested reviewers versus editorial reviews? Do we have to have someone we've chosen independently, or if we look at the 3 they've given and say, actually, if I was given this paper, those would be the 2 out of the 3 I would have chosen anyway? Is there some limit on this?
For sure. So I would typically advise you to get one like non-suggested person, but in the situation you've outlined, like that's completely fine if these are the people you'd be reaching out to anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So generally we shouldn't do it, but it's not like an absolute rule.
Yeah, I encourage you to use them when possible. But yeah, just make sure that if you're doing 2 reviews, make sure both of them aren't typically suggested.
And actually, well, that links to my second question. I apologize if I missed it. There was a few minutes in the middle. I had to pop off. Is there what's the minimum number? I'm assuming it's 2, or is it 3?
2. Yeah. So it's 2 reviews, and then that comes with a decision to the section editor.
Okay.
Or a recommendation for the section editor to make a decision on.
Okay. Thank you.
I like your boat, Timothy.
Yes. My
ship,
dad.
Sorry, ship.
It's a ship, I think. Yes, it's the Amerigo Vespucci, which is an Italian training ship.
Fancy.
Yes, my dad builds them. I like having it in the background. It kind of looks a bit nicer.
It's a nice air of authority for sure.
And I guess so I'm actually a physicist, but I'm a biologist nowadays. And I guess I was attracted to this from sort of a patterning point of view. I guess, at the start in your intro, you talked about how you wanted it to be a very broad journal. If we get a paper and we're like, to me, this may be complex systems, but to other people, I could see them not liking it. Do we go to you as a person to kind of soundboard, or is there a particular route that we should go for soundboarding on that? Sort of that, I guess at the start, when we're trying to define what we mean by complex systems, it's going to be something that maybe happens a bit more often.
I think that last piece, I think, really touches on the crux of it, Timothy, which is, if you ask folks around the globe what they think complexity is, if you ask someone in Europe, in Asia, and they'll all give you different responses. And so, there's one thing we have planned for sort of the beginning half of next year to have sort of section level meetings. So, it'll be the section editors and all human health and complexity and nature kind of stuff, and all the academic editors in that section to sort of have these kind of discussions, because they're discussions that sort of like happen in the wild currently. But in the meantime, the best thing I can say again is like, this is really where the section we're discussing with the section editors comes in. I mean, to your point, they might have specific views of what complexity is. That's kind of in the eye of the beholder. But I think in that, we typically want to be more inclusive than exclusive. So if a paper comes across your desk, you're sort of the kind of the person we're going for perhaps 5 years in the future, or sorry, we caught you 5 years past, of the I'm a physicist, but I'm really interested in biology. But so we have to sort of, as people sort of transition into that overlapping space, how can we sort of accommodate those people? So my advice is generally be more inclusive than exclusive. And then if the section editor takes a look at it and goes, whoa, I really think this is like, if the paper's making it to you, it's the section editor has already screened it to some level to be like, oh, I think this is worthy.
Okay.
But if you come up with a recommendation, they think like, oh, this really is kind of like a bit of left field, they'll let you know.
Okay. But yeah, I think it's useful to know that your view is that we should generally, at least at the start, err on the side of lenient, or not, maybe not lenient, but err on the side of being flexible, I guess, at the start, whilst we're still defining.
Yeah. We're very interested. We don't want to get a reputation for being like, we're the arbiters and gatekeepers of what complexity is, because that's very much an evolving thing. So as long as we like get a reputation for being open to the conversation, that's kind of what we're
I think, because for me, like when I started in biology, systems biology was a very broad church, and then it was mentioned earlier by someone, and molecular systems biology is a very good journal, but it has become a very specific thing now, very different from what I think it was originally envisaged. And so I guess this is a good aim to not go down that route.
Very much. We're trying to be as conscientious about that as possible. Sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but in a situation like this, it can be easier to say what something isn't than what it is. So kind of as it comes across, it'll be easy to go, now that we're reviewing this, maybe we wouldn't include it, but it's kind of hard to define from the get-go what it is going to be and provide those guidelines. So
for sure.
But would it also be possible for obviously the invite's going to come from a section editor, so could that also be a route for an academic editor to reach out to the section editor who invited them and say, I've got concerns, this might not be within scope, can you discuss your thought process with me?
Definitely. Yeah. That's completely allowed. And I'd also, in that instance, I'll highlight as well that I think Jenny touched on this. If a section editor invites you to a paper that you think is perhaps like not a good fit for the journal, we sort of would prefer you to accept the assignment and then write the review, or just write a quick comment that says like, hey, I don't think this is necessarily like a great inclusion for the journal, because that just means it stops either, that if you just reject the assignment, it will go back into the queue and it might be another week before the author gets a decision. And also it means that we sort of, in accepting the paper and then rejecting it, we sort of capture your thoughts that it's like, okay, this is not really a good fit for the journal there.
There is that reject and transfer option as well. So if staff or section editors think it could be suitable for another journal, but it's not going to fall within complex system scope, then a reject and transfer decision could mean that it still is in the publication journey, just elsewhere.
Yes. I also got another direct question from Jahir, which is, why are the COIs for editors? Can I handle submissions from institutions where I have worked or am currently working, or from previous collaborators, or should I transfer them to another editor? Great question. So it's really, as Jenny mentioned, it's sort of like a 5-year period, but there's kind of flexibility to that, just because these are smaller fields and there's, some of them you'll only be able to find a certain number of people in them. And so to your question, Jahi, I think, this is kind of up to your discretion. We encourage you to, it's going to be inevitable that you see familiar names on papers that you handle. And I'd say it's more like, if you haven't worked with them personally directly, like you know them on a first name basis, you should feel pretty comfortable to handle it. It's more in the really obvious cases of, I worked with this person last year, they look after my dog, they know my kids' names, that kind of stuff. That where we're like watching out for conflicts of interest. But typically you should be fine. Again, if you ever have questions, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can give you more advice on that.
I think also our conflict of interest concerns usually are mainly between reviewers and authors, or academic editors and authors. We're not as concerned about conflicts of interest between reviewers and editors. So if it's someone that you've worked with, that's not as much of a concern as if it's someone that the authors have worked with recently or published with recently. So we understand that you're going to be using your system and your network to be finding people. So that's not as much of a concern for us.
Definitely.
Dina has shared also our main policy on competing interest as well in the chat. So that's on our external webpage. So if you ever want to check that in the process of inviting reviewers, check back to it to see if there's someone. But yeah, as Joe mentioned, you could also reach out.
Awesome.
Any other questions? if something does come up, you know, an hour after the presentation, 5 minutes after we finish, you know, definitely do reach out to us, send emails to these inboxes. You've got all of our contact information. Yeah, we really want you to be using these inboxes. As I mentioned, we don't want you confused or not confident in the decision at any point. So do use us to make those final decisions if you're ever not sure. Yeah, we have a few minutes left. There's no more questions. Yeah, do you want to just walk through dimensions quickly, Joe?
That'd be great, thanks. Guys, so I just wanted to share my screen real quick. I just wanted to flag a tool. I am not involved in any way with the company that runs this tool. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's called Dimensions. It's just a really powerful tool that I've talked to a number of other editors on my other boards who quite enjoy using it. It's really good for finding reviewers. It's really good for finding collaborators if you're looking for someone to help you on a project. So let's do a very quick flying visit here, but happy to, you know, if you have a question about this, follow up. So it's a bibliometrics tool that you can sort of just add a bunch of different filters and cross sections to find the answer that you want. And so, you know, if I'm finding a reviewer, I've got publications up here, datasets, grants, patents, clinical trials. But let's do an imaginary example of we're trying to find a paper on, I just got a digital health example, telehealth and mHealth. And so we want to look at a journal that is, you know, we're looking for reviewers. So let's say look at the Lancet Digital Health, because it's a quality journal that will have quality papers and authors that we might want to use as reviewers. We only want to look at people who've written the last 3 years to know that they're still currently active. So we'll filter 2021 to 2023 over here on the left. So now I've got my filters showing at the top here, the dates and the journal. So in the 3 years from 2021 to 2023, the Lancet published 391 papers. And now I can enter my sort of like free text up here to be a little more specific. And as you can see, I can search in full data and the title and abstract. DOI is not really helpful here. But let's keep it broad. Title and abstract can be pretty specific, but if we wanted a really specific person, we'd be using that. So let's say telehealth and mHealth, and we can use our operators in different ways, of course. And so in the last 3 years, they've published 11 papers that cover both digital health and telehealth in the full text. And, you know, I can just click on this one right here and say, oh, cool, you know, it's got 28 metric, 4 citations, it's a solid piece. And it will show me all of the authors currently working or who worked on this paper. And let's just click into Carissa Lowe. So now I can remove filters at the top. So I want to remove the Lancet because I want to see what Dr. Lowe has written outside of the Lancet. I can keep telehealth in there. And so I can just see all the papers that Dr. Lowe has published in the last 3 years. Digital health papers looked at. Yeah, so it looks like they would be a good fit because there's a lot of sort of patient monitoring as I'm going through their publication record. There's a lot of papers on patient monitoring and that kind of stuff. So now just, you know, look up Carissa A. Lowe and, you know, find them either on their university site, you know, reach out to them, or through PubMed and just say, hey, Dr. Lowe, I saw this paper that you wrote in 2022 in Lancet Digital Health, thought it was really interesting. I have a relevant paper that I'd like to review and would love to consider it. Would you mind considering doing a review for us? So pretty straightforward. It's a really powerful tool. It's again free, and I just encourage you guys to click around and play around in it. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. But as finding reviewers and such, it's one of the best tools there is, I think. And yes, thought I'd share it with you. So
yeah, any tool that can help with finding reviewers, I think, is good. I do understand that that's a big pain point or a big concern for a lot of academic editors. So anything that can provide some suggestions is great.
For sure. Well, if you guys happy to answer any other questions, but I know you're all exceptionally busy people. I was happy to return some time to your days as well, if you would prefer. So do a slight awkward pause.
Yeah, I have to go now anyway. So thank you very much. It was very helpful.
Perfect. It's great to meet you, Timothy. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, we might then finish and give some time back to people's days. As I mentioned, everything's going to be shared afterwards, so do look for that email. I think there'll be a survey as the webinar, so give us any feedback, things we could do better. But thank you so much for coming today. It's been fantastic to chat to you all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.